And once again, we are reminded that the only thing that can ruin a great night out with Arsenal fans is the football. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, on Twitter, and Gunner. Well, I am sat in a hotel room across from Clive, staring out at a wet Porto. There is a seagull staring back at me, wondering if maybe he should attempt to figure out how to move a sliding door open and get in here and see if there's any food for him. So hopefully he doesn't do that because he's a very intimidating looking seagull. Beautiful city and a beautiful time with friends old and new, and just not a beautiful time watching Arsenal play football. So I imagine the thing everybody's here to listen to is the analysis of the game. So that's what we'll stick with primarily. But we'll give you just a little bit of flavor of the experience of being here, because that's part of the reason for being here. And there'll be much, much more of that over on the Patreon side, video travel log. And there's obviously an instant reaction over there that Tim and Paul did. But we're going to stick it out just with the two of us here. And I can stare into Clive's eyes as he is disappointed with the things I say, and as he gives me threatening glances when I try to interrupt him. And here with me now is the great man, Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello. I'm just looking out the window, to be honest, but I'll save my glances for you real quick.
I have no doubt. How are you feeling today? Just emotionally. Let's just start there. It's funny because going into the game, the atmosphere was celebratory and expectant, and I felt really good going into this game. But the thing that struck me, I think back to some of the big Champions League ties against Barca and Bayern and things like that, and the nerves I had even a week before that game. Seeing people out and about before this game, and maybe the European away days are always like this. I don't know. It's my first one, but everybody seemed so confident. And then seeing people after the game, it was like they'd seen a ghost. It was, and I know it's a sucker punch from a late goal, but the mood was funereal at the end. So I'm wondering, now that you've had a night to sleep on it, just how you're feeling emotionally about the tie and about how things went.
Yeah, I do think there was a lot of confidence around. I was confident up until the night of the press conference. For the patrons, sorry for repeating myself, but when Arteta came out of the line, 7 years since he'd been to the last 16 and 14 years since he'd been in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, that really took my breath away. And that reminded me of the challenge. That reminded me of where we've been, where the club has been. And then you think about the lack of experience in this group around Champions League knockout games. You think about the young coaching staff. You think about these players, still the third youngest team in the league. And then you look at it, you say to yourself, why am I going to be overconfident? So I just brought in my pre-match nerves. I didn't predict this, but I did predict it's going to be more difficult than some people felt. And so I wasn't totally surprised. And let's be honest, minute one, the first three passes were just like, something is wrong here. It was clear. The basic fundamentals of trapping the ball we were finding quite difficult. So that's where we were, Elliot. So that's my pre-game. Pre-game off the pitch, it was a wonderful experience to be here. And when you do these games, it's not just about winning, it's about the experience. And part of the experience is suffering pain. And that builds you for the joy down the road. I mean, I've seen some painful moments, none more painful than lying from the halfway line. And I felt that yesterday, but I do think it's important to share in the joy with each other, but sometimes it's important to share in the pain as well. And only ask the people understand the pain we're going through today. But also, finally, everyone feels pretty confident for the return leg. So no doubt we'll discuss that as we go forward.
Yeah, I'm sort of between two minds of how I feel about the return leg. And I think it's too soon for me to process how much of that is just the emotion of what happened last night and how much of that is me thinking it'll actually be difficult. I mean, the last time we lost at Porto, we lost 2-0, and then we beat them 5-0 in the return leg. So a little bit of history there.
Long time ago.
Yeah, very long time ago. But also a very long time since we've been through this stage of the Champions League, 14 years now. So definitely some things to put right. Just from my standpoint of doing my first away trip in Europe, obviously great to see. There was a Arsenal fan who fell in the river. There was, lots of eating and celebration and drinking. The funny thing is it's a light night of drinking because There's nothing to drink once you get to the game. They hold you about an hour after the game before they let you out. So you've got a very clear head to think about what you've just seen and feel that gut punch keenly and clear-headedly. The interesting thing walking around the city and talking to some people just locally, who knew you were Arsenal fans, they didn't think they had much of a chance, and they're going through some hard things this season themselves. So this was their cup final. This was their chance to make something of a season that feels a little bit lost, it seems. And I don't want to overplay their performance, but they did a lap of honor at the end of this. The stadium was so loud when they scored. The reaction to it was a season of frustration being unleashed at Arsenal. So I think sometimes you catch a team where the only thing left that they have to make a special season is beating you. And maybe we didn't match that intensity. Maybe we bought a little of our own hype after 11-0 in the last 2 away games we played. So you get there, and it was this celebratory atmosphere, as I said. And I have to say, Clive, to your point, this is where I want to start. I think we, speaking for the fans, in terms of our volume, our noise, our exuberance, there was a nervousness amongst us that transmitted from the way the game started, right from the beginning. And he picked the best lineup he had available. We can get onto the missing players later, but balls rolling under feet, loose first touches, passes not going where they need to. You just look at basic things like pass percentage. Players who are usually much cleaner with their touch and their control and their passing had miscontrols and gave balls away. And it became very clear early that we were nervous and that they were going to take away any flow we could develop where we could start to get a feel for the game. I'm curious about that opening stage, how you feel about just the lack of precision in our game.
Yeah, there's an emotional side to football, a soft factor side that we don't always appreciate. So we go to a game and we're all excited, have a few drinks, sit there. Come on then, lads, give us what you gave us last week. And,
5 more, please, yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. Then you strip yourself back and you think, well, that's William Saliba's first knockout game in Champions League. In fact, it's Saka's first. It's Martinelli's first. I mean, I think maybe only Havertz in starting 11 may have played a Champions League qualifier before. And so you look around and you say, okay, this is interesting. There's a side of the game that we sometimes maybe underappreciate. And the word experience, what does that mean? It means somebody that you look to that's been here before. And when he says, come on, G up, we can do this, you believe him because he's done it. He'll play the pass into the right areas at the right time because he knows how to manage a game. I'm using the air quotes he, because there's 3 or 4 players in this team there's 2 or 3 maybe that we missed for this day that none of us were really mentioning with a loud volume before the game, given our form. But then you realise there are football matches and then there are away games in the Champions League where it's refereed differently, the whole eco-structure of the game and the lack of contact allowed really does cause us a problem. It really does. The Arsenal kryptonite for me is take away the flow, take away the ball in playtime, manage the energy and intensity of the game, make sure you get plenty of rest, plenty of stoppages. That stops us. And what it does, it forces us into what I call a false domination, and we forget our purpose. Newcastle were the first one to do it last season, and then it's been done a few times since, but not as well as Porto, to be honest. Not as well as Porto. I think they really did a job on us, and sometimes you've got to tip your hat to them.
I want to be careful about how I say this, but I want to get your take on this. There's a part of me that understands the nerves and the experience angle and understands why we struggle to come to terms with it. And well, let me just read out the stat because I think it's an important context to the game.
Yeah.
The ball was in play for just 51.7% of tonight's match between Arsenal and Porto. That is by some distance the lowest percentage of any of the round of 16 ties so far this season. Now, before you say that's an outlier, Porto averages 51.9% in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So this is their game plan, is to junk up the game. And there were 36 fouls. And so the referee, you can talk about a referee without blaming a referee. I think what I'm trying to say here is the referee was complicit in allowing them to play the way they wanted, because up until basically the last maybe 15 minutes of the game, if they went down, they got a foul. They got it at corners. They got it when we pressed. Obviously, Rice got the early yellow, which may have been a yellow, but then he got that next foul that had him walking a tightrope, and I thought he sort of shrunk from the game after that. Before I give you my take on why I'm very frustrated about this game, what do you think of Porto's plan to keep us from getting into a flow, and the extent to which we didn't really have an answer for that? Is there an answer for that? How do you, because they're going to try to do it again at the Emirates, how do you get any rhythm or any momentum in a game where the opposition is going to try to keep the ball out of play as much as possible?
Yeah, I don't know the referee, but he played to the environment. So the environment of a touch and a big cheer from the crowd, it mine's almost like being at Everton. Like Everton away, any touch their players, big loud noise. If Tim was here, he'd be nodding right now, and they get the foul. But in the English game, what we do is we encourage duels. But duels are encouraged, and referees try to interpret duels appropriately. In the Champions League, there's no interpretation. If somebody can position their body in a way and just have a big scream, they go down, they get the foul. Referees rather not have the drama, just restart the game. And for us, it's a problem. Now, Porto are obviously a moments team. They want to play in moments. They want to play in counter-attack moments. Arsenal are a flow team. Porto were able to play a moments game. Yeah, and that's it. And now when we get to the Emirates now, I use the word ecosystem on purpose, Elliot. We'll create our own ecosystem at the Emirates, where a referee will no doubt be influenced by our noise, by what we say, how we react, and how our players feel in that environment. And I sense, we'll have a home advantage to how the game is played, how the game is flowing along, how the game is managed. It's up to us to execute. And I said last night on a tweet, I sort of said, there are times in football, never get too high, but never get too low. If this game had ended 0-0, I wonder what the conversation would have been. I think 1-0 allows us to really, really learn the lessons, because I do feel in this game, we didn't have the right approach for the opposition that we were playing against. And I'll come on to that a bit later.
We're definitely going to want to come on to game management at the end, but I think we can get to that sort of chronologically. From Porto's standpoint, they executed perfectly. We had 65% possession, but no shots on target. 7 shots total. Created next to nothing. Weren't able to get in our flow. They were able to eliminate our most threatening players, really. I think the front three all struggled. Trossard had 19 touches, I believe, in this game. We just couldn't get the ball into him. The central spaces were being vacated, but we weren't really effectively creating the overloads on either wing. I have a question sort of about where the ball progression comes from. And look, you can't pick Zinchenko if he's injured, and you can't pick Gabriel Jesus if he's injured, and you can't pick Thomas Partey if he's injured, which he most commonly is. But this thing of inverting Ben White against Burnley, against West Ham, if these teams don't come out at you, ball progression becomes less of an issue. But I think we saw a bit of a limitation to Ben White playing this role in this game at this level, because he played one beautiful line-breaking pass to Odegaard. But other than that, I really don't think he looked as comfortable stepping into the midfield. He played 3 progressive passes in the entire game. He had 2 final third entries in the entire game, despite playing 52 passes on the night. So I think that, combined with Kivior being on the left, who, it's not that he did anything wrong per se. I just think there was a lack of ability to break their lines. And one advantage we had of our view, we were way up in the gods, right? Way up there. But it was actually an excellent view, almost too good a view. I think you made a really good point to me. You turned to me and said, Elliot, you can almost see it like you're playing Xbox or playing PlayStation because you have too good a view of it. But it really did look compressed. There was probably at times 10 yards between their deepest defender and their most advanced attacker. And either because we didn't want to take risks or because we didn't have the right players out there, we didn't test that back line. We didn't progress the ball very well. So how much of that is conservatism by design? How much of that is maybe Ben White in midfield? What do you think of the lack of ball progression that we had and the ability to break them down?
Excuse me, I don't think it's Ben White in midfield, and I wasn't sure when we were watching the game, was this something like similar to Man City at home when we were trying to have a considered build-up? But I listened to Arteta afterwards, and it was not the plan. And that's why we look different in the second half. As for the spaces front to back, that's a normal game. Football is incredible how they compress the game into small areas of the pitch and expand out when they have possession. These guys are super athletes. I don't know how they do it. So that level of spacing is fairly normal. I thought the way Porto played in their sort of mid-block, and they let us play outside of their shape. So I didn't think it was a problem getting to Odegaard's feet. But for me, it was the next thing that happened. I didn't think it was a problem getting to Havertz and Trossard on occasions. The next thing that happened was not very progressive. And I think the mentality to hurt them, we didn't have it. We didn't have that mentality to hurt them. But I didn't mind in the first phase of the game. This is a 180-minute tie. So I'm thinking, okay, we're having a look at them. We're seeing who's on detail. We're having a look at them. But then as the game went on, we get a defeat. You look back and think, we had a lot of the ball in that first half, and what did we do with it? Right? So we didn't do enough, you know? So then we did show some purpose in the second half, but it wasn't quite enough to move them around. And so when you're talking, I've got to have to say this, I thought Porto were very disciplined to stay in their shape. And unlike Burnley and West Ham, when we played our double false nines, they were not conned by their movement. They were not conned by them standing in the half spaces. They just stood there and went, yeah, well, you can do that if you want. We're not moving. We're not moving.
Can I ask something about that specifically, though? I want to double click on that, because I think one thing that happens when defenses are very deep.
They weren't super deep, Elliot.
No, they weren't deep. But what I was going to say, against West Ham and Burnley, they were deeper.
Yeah.
And when the runs come from deep and they come from late, it's very hard for the defenders to know when to engage them, when to track the run. They're already in their box. I think this is what I think you have to do when you face a certain type of tactic, is you have to let them know that they could get punished. Like my point, Hank, just hear me out. We did not play the ball in behind. We did not try to go over the top into the runners. We did not try to go in beyond them enough. And I think because of that, they got very comfortable with where their line was set. And so their line was never broken. Their line was never tested. Like, it disappoints me that a team that was going to set their line where they did and have as little of the ball as they did never really had to question, are they going to get beyond us? Are they going to get in behind us? And I think we were very comfortable keeping the ball and going side to side, and very reluctant to play that ball. And I don't want to pick on Kivior, but like, this is where I think we miss Zinchenko. Martinelli had a very bad game in a lot of respects. But he was the one guy who was making those vertical runs and wanted to push them back. And like, you were turning to me at times just saying, play it. It's on. Play it. And I don't know where that conservatism came from, whether it came from the manager saying, let's just manage our way through this and get them back to the Emirates, or the players feeling cowed by the moment, you know?
Yeah, as I said just now, Arteta that was not the plan.
No.
It was not the plan. So he felt we didn't play with enough purpose. And that comes back to the emotional side of these games and maybe the fear factor in some of us. And we can see everything from our vantage point. Maybe we can see more than the players can see. So I'm trying to be fair in my analysis here. I think there was opportunities that we turned away from. This wasn't Aston Villa, or it wasn't as bad as even Chelsea at home, although the Chelsea away game, was quite similar to this, where our flow was interrupted but they did it by tackling us and by harassing us. And then what did we do? We went more direct, and then we got into them, and as soon as we did, for 7 minutes, we blew them away. For me, the approach was wrong. You can talk about the players as much as you like, the players who are there, the players who are not there. If the approach was more direct, I think we'd have seen a slightly different game. And by that I mean, I felt they were comfortable in their shape. So you had to distort their shape. You had to distort them by being either direct over the top or direct going to the back line. And that means we needed more of in this game, we needed more of a target man centre forward for this game to give us the structure. Not for the last two games, but for this game. So if we had Jesus, fine. If not Jesus, it's Havertz. And you say, we're going to go to you and we want you to compete there. And then they're going to have to decide what they do. If you win it, they're going to have to drop off. If you don't win it, they're going to have to compete with you. They might get the foul, you might get the foul. We get the foul, we get a set piece in central areas, high up the pitch. But what we did, we played around, out to our wide men, who I think are up against two excellent fullbacks. You know, the guy Wendell played left back. I thought he was excellent. You know, I haven't watched the game, but I watched Saka against him, and either Saka had concrete boots on, or this guy was sharp.
Yeah.
So, and that's just my human eye told me. And so they managed our wide men pretty well. And I agree with you, Martinelli. Although his numbers may not look good, he played like him. He played with no fear. You know, and a lot of us could take, a lot of our players could take something from him. The execution was not perfect all the time, and maybe he tried too hard on occasions, but there was no fear in him. You know, and I think there was a little bit of fear to progress the ball in other players. So, you learn all the time. We play 55, 60 games a season. For most of them, I feel our coaching staff worked the other team out brilliantly. If you listen to Arteta, he says, we'll be ready for them next time. That is him saying to all of us, we didn't get it right tonight. We didn't play the right game for this opposition, and we're going to fix it.
I mean, I would have had him, if I were him, I would have had my players watching them do their lap of honor. They did a lap of honor after this, and I would have been saying, look at this. Look at what it means to them to beat you. Think of what they're going to be bringing back to the Emirates. You know, you have to show them your medal, because I don't want to go into, well, I was going to say I don't want to go into cliches, and I'm going to. Like, we are better than this team. So, look, people say, oh, it's Champions League. Champions League is different. It isn't. The ball's still round. The grass is still green. Like, the pitch wasn't great. I understand that. The refereeing is different. But, like, this Arsenal, if we are anywhere near as good as we think we are and say we are, we should blow that Porto team off the pitch. They're not very good. They're not scoring goals in the Primera. Their main tactic is to lay on the ground and kill the game. Our players, I think, shrunk from the moment a little bit, if I'm being honest. I don't want to put the boot in, but I'll say the nervousness cost them. One thing that I thought was shocking was the number of times long, straight balls just befuddled our excellent center backs. And Saliba, I think I turned to you at one point. I said, I forget how young our center backs are sometimes. This is a big stage that he hasn't been on before for a very young man anchoring a back line. And I do think we've given him a slightly different role with Ben White inverting. And it's a lot of complex adjustment to make in the way we play. They could hit the ball long and straight, and we let it bounce. You know, I think every William Saliba header went to a Porto player. Again, not to pick on him so much, but to say
but you just are.
There were well, I mean, we saw it, right? There were uncharacteristic errors in our game that I think just played into the hands of what they wanted to do, and this was just not a performance at the level that we expect from this group.
Yeah, so the Ben White inverting thing, I think he inverted. He didn't invert all the time, Elliot. You know, he was inside and out. But when he does go inside, it forces Saliba to be the right centre back.
Yeah,
and for me, he's a central centre back. Not just for me, sorry, for everybody, he's a central centre back. And we miss him in that area. I think he's a brilliant sweeper in the three. He understands his role there. And he played the right centre-back fantastically well in the last against Burnley and against West Ham. When he was there, he drove the ball forward. And so it's not something that he can't do. And when you say to me, we're better than this Porto team, I sort of agree with you. But I don't feel that today. You know, I thought they did well. I thought they closed the gap on us. They really did. But we were better than Lens, and we still lost in Lens. You know, so these things happen. It's what you do over the two legs. Yeah. We walked into their house, and they played above themselves and played some very good, well-structured football. They didn't care, didn't have the ball. When they did, they tried to get into us. However, we controlled the majority of that game. And so the issues are with us. For me, the issues within our playing approach to the game that was in front of us. And we didn't get it right. And we suffered a huge price for one unbelievable effort in the last minute of the game. And I hope this team learns from this. And by that, sometimes you need to feel the heat of the oven to know I shouldn't touch it. Do you know what I mean? You need to feel it. You need to remember it. It needs to scar you. You need to remember it so you know when you get your situations again, you need to get your details right, get your first touch right. Make sure you run with purpose. Make sure you pass with purpose in the right direction. Remind yourself that you never crack this game. You know, and I think it's a huge lesson for our team. And I'm not just talking one or two people. I'm talking the team, everybody, the coaching staff. I'm talking, if you look at our club top to bottom, this is a new group, right? And let's be honest, we met a lot of people yesterday in the stands, and there were some old grizzly geezers like me there. There's a lot of young fans in the away support that haven't done this for a long time. They haven't done this. And so as a fan group, we're reminding ourselves, we're learning about these Champions League games, and they are different to me. They are a different sport.
It's funny, there was that moment, like it was all very celebratory, as I was saying, and very expectant. And then there was that moment where the Champions League anthem starts playing and everybody's collective sphincters tighten, and you're like, oh yeah, here we go.
This is real.
And it is difficult because sometimes I think players are aware of the history and, can carry with them the scars of past teams and feel it's their job to put it right, which of course it's not. They're not responsible for the Monaco defeat or the Bayern tie or the Barcelona tie. But sometimes football is about complex tactics and counter tactics and individual brilliance. Like sometimes football is just about players playing poorly or playing well. And
or flat.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, I thought this was collectively and individually a poor performance. I thought Saka lacked burst. I thought Martinelli had sloppy touches when he could have gotten in. I thought Kai had, he had a chance for a good header that he mistimed, I think off a corner. Saliba let balls bounce and his headers weren't finding their man. Declan Rice, after he got the yellow, I thought wasn't able to boss the midfield the way he normally would. Trossard had 19 touches? Let's see. He had 19 touches and just 9 completed passes. And, it's one thing if he's a target man running behind striker, but when you play a guy who's a false 9, one of the things you're doing is trying to get an extra pair of feet to pass it to, either between the lines or, at the top of their defense. And to be that absent, I think just demonstrates how difficult it was for us to progress it past their first wave, their first line, and get it into those players. And, let's be honest, I'd be on this pod criticizing Eddie Nketiah if he had a game like that. And Eddie's job is to get behind. Trossard's job is not. So, I don't think that worked in this game. And so collectively and individually, just a below par performance. And the funny thing is, I was calling for Jorginho to come on at halftime. I thought Rice, my biggest worry, I said this to you multiple times, right? I said two things. Rice getting a red card, and then we have to play with 10 men in this leg and not have him for the return leg. That was my nightmare scenario. And the way the ref was calling the game, I was worried about it. I was calling for Jorginho to come on. He comes on, and the first 3 minutes, he looked like we did the first 3 minutes of the game. Couldn't trap a ball, couldn't control it, couldn't find a teammate. It just, for someone with that much experience to come on and look that ragged, I think tells you what these players feel playing on this stage. I do want to, there's a lot more I want to talk about. We do have to preview Newcastle a bit, but I do want to do the game management piece at the end. So let's talk about that. Something weird happened when we got into stoppage time. Almost like the players felt they couldn't leave with the draw. They had to leave with the win. Having done enough to come home. And I mean, if this is 0-0, it's a very comfortable situation. Not comfortable is the wrong way to put it, but we were 1-5 favorites going into this tie. We're now 1-2 favorites. I think it had been 0-0, we would have stayed 1-5 favorites. What I'm saying is we didn't have to go try to win it. And yet they played frantically in that stoppage time. Rice did a Cruyff at the top of the box and lost it. Martinelli obviously tried to play the ball out for the counter that turns into their goal. You and I just watched it back about 5 different times. The funny thing about that Martinelli pass is the counter is on. There's a 3-on-1 if he can pick out one of those guys. He picks out none of those guys, and then they score a bit of a wonder goal. So Mikel was very, very upset about the way we managed the last few minutes of the game. What's your take on why we played it that way and some of the things we did wrong?
It wasn't even the last few minutes. It was just the last minute.
Yeah.
You lose the ball 2 or 3 times in those deep areas, then you're going to suffer, right? And it was the only time of the game when it was like, you have it, we have it. That wasn't the game. It wasn't the game. It was just like, it was much more cautious than that. And for some reason, on the edge of the area, Declan tried to do a Cruyff-type turn when a little clip down the line would have worked. Then we win it back, and then we try again to get in behind. And I understand it. I do. I genuinely, we can't sit here and say we didn't play with purpose And then when we try to play with purpose, then criticise. However, if you're going to do it, you got to do it. You got to do it in a conservative way. And it reminds me so much of the David Raya kick out at Lens when he curled it inside short when he should have faded it over the top. Intercepted, they come back in and score. Same with Martinelli. He tried to curl it short where he should have faded it over the top. If it goes over the top, goes out for a throw-in, we got a 0-0 draw. If it goes short, you know what could happen. Yeah. Very, very similar. These are the minutiae decisions that happen in the game. Odegaard flicked it on over the defender's head rather than not quite reach him or couldn't get his leg up to it. Then we're in behind and who knows what could happen. But I do think if you want to take away the overall, because there's going to be incidents and moments, there's going to be good performances, bad performances. There's 2 or 3 themes for me. One, let's remind ourselves how inexperienced we are at this level. You know, it's not about talent always. It's about how you feel in your game. 2, I don't think our approach was appropriate for this opposition. But maybe now we've seen this opposition, we know the approach. I wasn't saying it before the game, you know, so I've got to be fair there. And 3, I think maybe potentially, this is just something, a little hunch I have. When you see that many players that nervous, I wonder about the messages they were getting in the team talks. If you know as a club what we want to achieve at this level, you have to talk to players in a way where they feel relaxed, where they feel they belong there. And we've got to relax these players. When they get back to the Emirates, they're going to need a bit of pick-me-up this week.
Yeah.
You know, for sure.
And we'll talk about this with the Newcastle game, but I think it takes on almost a greater significance than it had. One of the reasons I think I feel so hurt today, too, is I had allowed myself to start to dream very, very big, having seen this team be dominant throughout the season, but maybe not quite executing on that dominance. And then where we've gone since Dubai, right? I mean, this has been a run since Dubai from the heavens. You know, plus 19 goal difference, beating Liverpool, winning away games 6-0, 5-0. The come down was a great distance, right? In isolation, losing 1-0 away with no away goals rule to Porto is not the end of the world. But it dings that confidence. I think it dents that feeling that maybe, just maybe, something is happening with this Arsenal where we've ascended to a new level at the very top of the game. Now, that's not to say we haven't, but it definitely, the distance that we fell emotionally from where we had been was a great distance. And coping with that, I think, for the players and for the fans will be difficult. A couple of things that the manager said, and it's funny, reading his comments, I feel like we could have just read his comments and that could be the podcast because he's hitting all the same notes.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a good sign because we saw it the same way. But
that means it wasn't the plan then, doesn't it?
No. He said, on if they were surprised by the performance, no. Obviously, we're very disappointed by the way we gave the game away at the end and not managing situations well enough. If you cannot win it, don't lose it. We really dominated the game, but we lacked purpose, especially in the first half, to have much more aggression. Here's the key: to break lines, to play forward, to generate much more threat in their back line.
Yeah. In
the second half, there were much better things, and I agree with that. He says we created a lot of situations without creating much from it. On Porto breaking up the fluidity, that's the context of the game. This is interesting. He says we knew it, we prepared for it. Okay, that's something the referee has to manage. We cannot do anything about it, and we're going to have to handle it and play our game. So I thought, that was really interesting. It is the case that I think when a football game gets broken down into 51% ball and play type stuff, the game really starts to exist at the margins, right? Because you don't get these long periods of dominance where you strain them defensively. And I think what you saw from our players too is that pressure that, oh gosh, we have the ball in the area here. We have to execute. And suddenly you're snatching at chances or you're making weird decisions. Just before we switch gears a little bit, what do you think it does mentally to the players to have the ball in play that little, to have so little flow? And in terms of their game, maybe the decision-making or the risk-taking or the execution when the game's going to be, the whistle's going to be blowing every 30 seconds, every minute, and you're just not going to have a chance to keep trying to carry on and find an opening.
Yeah, momentum in game to game is important, but we create momentums in games. and we're unable to. So, we're used to, in England, watching an English game, the ball goes out for a corner, we all get excited. Then there's a bit of pushing and shoving in the box. And literally, it's like 1 minute from the corner, 1.5 minutes for the corner being taken. So almost the in-game momentum has gone. And you're now forced into another period of football. Ball comes in the box, referee's waiting for a tug, blows the whistle, restart. It's like, oh my gosh. So we've had a good bit of play, we've got a good corner. And then I'm not going to overemphasize set pieces, but I thought, well, we had Elliot 10 corners, was it something like that? I just saw the same corner every single time. I remember saying to you, we need to go short. The reason why, we were just trying to drop the ball into a set of crowded bodies. European referees, any sort of scream from a player, opposition player, and suddenly he gives a foul. You need to almost create an open play situation from a dead ball. Go short, rat-a-tat on the outside, and create running lanes. Get people out the box, create running lanes, and really attack the ball at pace. Whether it be an inverted cross, that suits me. And I just think we need to change it slightly. I guarantee you this will be different next time we play them. But I can only say this now because I've watched it. And sometimes you have to allow the players and the coaches. There are things you can prepare for. There are things you can cope with. And there are things that you learn. I guarantee you that they have learned a lot from that game. I've learned a lot from it. And we need to get after them in the home game.
I think we also learned a little bit about where their danger will come from. I thought Conceição looked really good.
Sharp.
You don't see our players getting dribbled past a lot. He found his way past a few different times. It's definitely a case now where I think the manager has that difficult thing that happens when you lose and play poorly in terms of sticking or twisting, right? Do you stick with a group that just gave you 11-0 on aggregate in 2 away league fixtures? Do you try to freshen it up? I mean, this is now.
He might not have a choice, right?
Yeah.
He made one substitution this game. Was it Jorginho came on?
What do you think of that? That he only made the one substitution? I mean, well, let's do this because I do want to talk about the subs and I do want to talk about the players returning from injury or not returning from injury. But before we do that, I have a unique opportunity because I'm sitting in the room with you. The opportunity to stare into your eyes and talk about shaving your privates.
Oh my God.
Like literally stare deeply into your eyes and talk about that. And I just want you to know, Clive, this is a safe space for talking about shaving your privates in this hotel room right here. There's a lawnmower just up the stairs. I've got this weird lofted room, so you can just walk up the stairs and get the lawnmower. While I'm doing this ad read, you could literally be shaving your privates. But you know what? Maybe best we don't share those devices. You should have one of your own. Yeah, Manscaped has great products. It's so funny, right? Like when they first wanted to advertise on this podcast, my whole thing was like, oh, that's going to be a little weird, a little silly. And then I was like, well, I shave my body and I do it with the same razor that's probably been in the shower for 9 months. Like, what am I doing here? It's terrible. It's not a good experience. So I'll try the products. And then you try the products. You're like, they're actually fantastic. If you do your chest, if you do your privates, they've got tonics and lotions to keep everything smooth and feeling good. They also have the Weed Whacker, which does the ears and nose hair, which, look, I'm at the age where there is that stuff, so you got to take care of it. It is weird. Hair stops growing in the places you want it growing and starts growing in the places you don't want it growing. So that's not ideal. Clive is literally leaving the room. That's how uncomfortable I have made him. By the way, the new lawnmower now has a foil blade, so you not only can trim, but you can go fully smooth, which is, I think, the whole goal. So I love that. And just great products that work the way they're supposed to. Long battery life, wet, dry. The 5th generation lawnmower, you got to give it a try. So you get 20% off and free shipping with code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. Okay, 20% off and free shipping with code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. So do that. And once you've done that, then you can get on to worrying about how to browse safely. In fact, Clive was just sitting here saying, I can't watch the highlights of the game. And I said, well, just use NordVPN. He's like, what's that? I'm like, do you listen to the podcast? He's like, no, hardly ever. Good point. Fair point. NordVPN is the best way to just browse where you want to browse. You can put an app on your iPad. You can put an app on your iPhone. You can put an app on your Android phone or tablet. You can put it on your Mac or your PC. And you just click and it'll let you browse wherever you want to browse. And that means that you can, like right now, I could browse back in the US and watch the game back on the Peacock app, right? I could browse Australian Netflix. I can browse in the UK to watch Match of the Day and see what they have to say about something if I ever wanted to know that. They also have threat protection to keep that spyware and malware off your computer if you are clicking on dodgy links, which football supporters from time to time are forced to do. So they're giving you 4 bonus months right now, which is really just a fantastic time to give it a try. You get 30-day money-back guarantee, so if it's not what you want, you can just cancel, no big deal. And 4 bonus months for free, plus a huge discount off the plan. So go to nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision, nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision. Do it now, Clive. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Okay. Welcome back into the room as the discomfort has eased. So let's start with the subs. At some point, the manager tells you what he thinks of you by whether he relies on you. And this is a crunch Champions League tie away, critical moment for the club. 1 sub, it's Jorginho, the experienced midfielder. No opportunity for Eddie, no opportunity for Reece, and interestingly, no opportunity for Emil Smith-Rowe. And I just think in a game where we created very little threat against a team that was, I think, very inferior to us, even in a game they won, the manager's decision to only make the 1 sub and only have it be the experienced midfielder and none of the 3 that I mentioned, I think it's a bit telling. So I'm curious what you make of his decision to only make 1 sub and where that leaves those other players who will be, I think, feeling a bit disappointed today they didn't have a chance to try to impact that game.
Yeah, well, there are games, Elliot, and there are big games, and there are big, important games. And in those games, I'm afraid you find out who's who. And I'm not being pretty clear for those that listen to me. There's a level here, and we're talking about experience, aren't we? And we're going to bring on even less experienced players and not had experience in this season. That wasn't the answer. Not in this game, not in this environment, not in this stage of competition. That wasn't the answer. For me, everyone's saying how superior you are to them. I didn't feel it. I'll watch it back. I didn't feel it. On the day, I didn't see a huge gap. I think we can turn it around when we're at home, but I didn't see a huge gap. And that's why people are talking about the 3 or 4 players who we know are trusted in Zinchenko, Jesus, Partey and Tomiyasu. We need those back on the bench. We need those back in our squad, healthy and fit, because there will be moments like this. When you start to play 2 competitions and you start to play every 3 days, you need your squad. When you're playing every 6 or 7 days, you can keep the 11 fairly similar. And that's what's coming around today. That's why those names are trending on my Twitter timeline, because people are talking about them. They talk about what's missing, and that's what we do, and that is our right. So I've got no problems with the subs. I've got more of an issue with getting our other players fit and healthy and effective, because that's where our season lies.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think it gives you a bit of a glimpse, I think, into our future in the direction of travel, because it's not to say we'll never see Reece or Eddie or Smith-Rowe again. I think they'll all play at some point this season. But when the chips are down, the players you trust are pretty evident. And, I don't want to make...
You Americans call them role players, don't you? Role players?
Yeah.
They're role players.
But I'd almost say, I think a role player has to actually play a role.
Yeah.
And the problem is if a role player gets 4-0 in the 80th minute. That's not a role player.
If a role player gets you call it DMP, is it DMP?
Yeah.
If a role player gets a DMP, there's no stress. There's no stress. Am I being harsh? I didn't look at that game and think we need to bring on Smith-Rowe. I didn't look at that. Because he's only just getting back to health. I didn't look at that situation. The player I longed for this night only, with a little bit of hindsight, was Gabriel Jesus.
He would have showed his boots. He would have gotten that. The difference between Trossard and Jesus, Trossard's a wonderful, wonderful player, but the ball has to find him. Jesus makes sure he finds the ball. Yeah. You know what I mean? He will battle. We needed someone to battle a little more. I think our players, to be fair, because the ref was calling everything, it was hard to battle, because if you battled, you got a foul call.
Yeah. But Jesus knows their culture. Jesus knows he knows their culture. He knows. He would have, maybe I'm wish casting here, but he's done exceptionally well in Europe. I think he wants to do something in this competition. I think the missing this game would have hurt him. And by the way, we don't know how healthy. Where is he? What's the situation with him?
Yeah, he may not be close for all
we don't know anything. So we're wishing these players back. We don't know where they are, So, but yeah, I just, I look at him and think, for this game, for this style of game, in this environment, you would have been useful of all the players. That's the one I missed the most. Trossard has been amazing. He's unlocked this team. But he has these days where you can't find him in the lineup. You just can't find him. And he has them. And you don't know where they're going to come from. I think as a manager, you have to recognise them and maybe get him out when he's having those days and go for plan B. I don't put the blame on him all the time, but if you are missing him out, he's not getting the touches, then the role doesn't work.
Yeah.
The role doesn't work. And so you have to change, right? So that means they've either marked him, rumbled him, they're not falling for the half space, standing still, rolling off him and Kai together on the piston. They're not falling for that. They're not moving. They're not being suckered in. I saw Pepe run to the corner flag once in this game. Remember I said to you, that's Pepe. And I thought to myself, at the moment I thought, why haven't we run him? He's a 40-year-old who played in slippers. Why haven't we run him? And that's what we need to do next time.
And I can't decide because, on the one hand, I'm like, why haven't we run him? And on the other hand, again, I don't want to be repetitive, but I'm going to do it anyway. The number of times we just didn't hit the ball that was on. There was a real reluctance to just let the ball go first time into the space behind their defensive line. So I think we made it easier for them. And Mikel talked about that. We weren't dangerous enough. And to be fair, in the second half, we tried a little more. I think there was a little more verticality in our game. There was a little more tempo to our passing. In terms of the subs, I don't have a problem with Mikel not bringing any of them on because I'm not sure that I trust that they would have done what was necessary. At one point, I said I would have brought Nelson on for Martinelli just because I think Martinelli seemed like he was starting to get frustrated with himself and with his game. He was pressing and it wasn't coming off, and he looked frustrated. And look, that can sound like being wise after the fact because it's his error that leads to their goal. But I want to say one thing about that. Reminds me a lot of Lons, right? Raya made an error, but for Lons to score, they had to do everything flawlessly. Martinelli gives the ball away. It still took an absolutely stunning strike, the only moment of quality in the whole game, to win it. And by the way, 94-01, I think, is when that flies in. Just the absolute gut punch. But yeah, Nelson for Martinelli is one I might have considered with the way he was looking and the frustration creeping in. Yeah,
I don't disagree with that, actually, Elliot, but maybe for the last 10 minutes. But I want to give Martinelli some praise here because I saw someone trying his heart out on that pitch, right? And intent to play for me, intent to provide a performance is important. And I showed he wasn't scared in the moment. I think when we lose like this, another player that was trending on my timeline was Ramsdale, right? And so I love watching where we all go. So we all go back to those places.
What did Raya do wrong in this game?
There's this, was he too far forward? Did he go up too early? I mean, when a goal is scored, there's normally 3 or 4 things that have gone wrong. And it's okay to look at them. It's okay to look at them. We can question Rice, we can question Martinelli, we can question the goalkeeper, we can question, the fact that we overcommitted on that side in the last minute. What are we doing? Why are we suddenly disorganised? Why has our spacing gone wrong? Who's telling us to calm down? Declan Rice is absolutely knackered. Why is he trying a Cruyff turn? Just clip it. And so it's interesting to see where we go in these moments. I told you where I've gone, and the most important thing is that we learn.
Yeah, and sometimes I think if your football's not coming off, here's the funny thing: we seem nervous, but they probably were too.
They were.
And I think one of the things that you can learn from what they did is they hit a lot. They wanted to just hit long, straight balls at us. Every time they got a restart, their keeper just kicked it up the pitch. And the number of times Saliba had it back to them or we let the ball bounce and then that created nervousness. What frustrates me a little? We could do that too.
Yeah.
Hit it long to Kai, hit it long to Saka, just go long and test their nervousness. Try to make them make a mistake. This seemed to me like it was going to be a game that wasn't going to be won by picking a lock. It was going to be won by who made a mistake. You kept saying that to me. It's a question of they're looking for us to make a mistake. Yeah. And we did make a mistake, and they executed brilliantly. And by the way, I'm not going to do the being at the ground is better. Not my point at all. But just so happens that where we were sat, if you put a TV camera on our seat, that would have been the angle for that shot, the Galeno shot.
Yeah.
It was always going in. Allison is not saving that. Ramsdale is not saving that. That ball was always going in. But like, I do think that as sort of a last thought here, it was a game where I think a mistake was going to lose it. And I don't know that sometimes it's okay to be a little agricultural. It's okay to be a little direct. I don't think we just sort of boot it into a space and see if they make a mistake enough. Yeah. We made it too easy for them by trying to be precise on a night when precision wasn't going to get the job done.
Yeah, we didn't work them hard enough. But I think, just your point on Porto, I think they tried to play out at the start. What did we do? We pressed them. What did they do? Kick out for throwing. How many times did they kick it out? They didn't have control of their possession. So they went long, and I find our centre-backs got this little habit sometimes, maybe it's just my nerves. You always taught you don't want to let the ball bounce, right? And once you let the ball bounce, the situation's in control of you. And we managed to deal with some of those, but I thought our, regain and then retaining was a little bit off, and they then decided to play a little bit more second ball, and Declan Rice was a little bit isolated. So again, we developed maybe a need. We understand now what our big game team requires. It maybe require a bit more of a traditional two midfield setup to make sure that if a team decides to go a bit longer, we can make sure we retain the ball. It may require a true centre forward rather than a false centre forward. It may require that. Right, so we can do all these games. It doesn't matter as long as they're fit and available. Hence my point about availability. That's the key thing. We have to get these guys back so we can change and adapt. And the message was in this game there was one adaptation move. It was Jorginho. Could it have been sooner? Could he have started? That's the only thing a hindsight move you could say.
Yeah. The
rest were not available for us.
Someone had to play the ball between the lines in the middle of the pitch. And two things have to happen for that. One person has to have the courage and the presence to do it. Another player has to show for it. I don't think we had either of those players on the pitch last night.
Can I say something there about Jorginho and what he offers when he's on form? I don't think we I think we underestimate his impact emotionally on the back end of our team, onto a Kivior, onto a Declan Rice. I think he supports them. Onto a Saliba. When they see him there, it's exactly what they want to see. Somebody that's done it. Now, hand up Elliot, I don't know how fit he is. He's been injured. He's been on the bench injured. I don't know how fit he is. But now I've seen that environment, seen these games, I'm thinking, we could have done with you in this game just to settle people down. So his first hour, last 40, whatever you decide to do, settle it down. Now, I will say I'm contradicting myself here. We messed up for 2 minutes, mate. We didn't play well, but we messed up for 2 minutes. That's what happened. So we shouldn't over-index the fact we were sloppy for 2 minutes at the end of the game, and it cost us massively.
Yep. Well, it's a gut punch. I think it is a wake-up call, too, and it is, a bit of a painful wake-up call, but about the level we need to be at and the level we need to maintain. We'll talk Newcastle briefly, but as a final thought on this, the return leg is a big moment for the club. Cannot crash out in the round of 16 again, not to inferior opposition. It would be such a bad moment for the project TM. Obviously, it would just be painful and would suck for the season, but the club needs progression in this competition, and it is definitely time that we put this round of 16 thing to bed. 14 years, not good enough. Obviously, 7 of those years, we weren't in the competition at all. Do you expect us to rise to the challenge in the away leg and maybe have it all our way and have one of those easy nights, or is this going to be a nail biter right to the wire?
I don't think any football nights are easy, apart from maybe Burnley at the weekend. So, yeah, look, I think I think it's important, Elliot, we win a Champions League game. Let's be honest. I was looking through my YouTubes and looking online. How many people have said the words, you know what? I think we had a better chance of winning the Champions League rather than the league. Come on, we've got to be honest here. We've got to be honest as people, as Arsenal people. It's crossed my mind. I may not have said it out loud, but it's crossed my mind. If I have said it out loud, I'm sure someone's going to tell me. And so that's where we were. And now we've all had a sharp intake of breath. This is the game of football, mate. This is the game. And it's not a smooth journey. You know, we suffered some pain here last night, and this builds us, right? It builds us as fans, and it builds our resilience. It's horrible, man, when you lose a game. I'm just thinking we won that game. Imagine how long we'd have been singing for into the night. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it would have been fantastic. But this is part of it, and I think we've had a bit of a slap. It's very important that it doesn't continue into Saturday night. One of our friends online was saying, of all the games in this stretch that we could lose, this is the one we could lose and we can fix. But we can't be losing the league games we got coming up. You know, the gaps at the top now are going to grow. Liverpool beat Luton last night. They got the cup final at the weekend. While Man City, I think, have got Bournemouth. We expect them to win. Suddenly, going to be a 4-5 point gap there. We'll have a game in hand, etc. So the light is shining on us on Saturday night. And we have to perform. So getting angsty and tense and overcritical is not going to create an environment that we need to go and sort Newcastle out. And for anybody like me who couldn't wait for this game after what happened when we went up to St James's Park, it's time to bring your Saturday night best, you know, for this one, because it's really going to be important for us.
Yeah, well, I think we can turn our attention to it then. And we'll have more on the Champions League stuff as we go, but Newcastle on Saturday night was always going to be a big game because, first of all, right now every Premier League game is big, but someone was saying this the other day. It almost feels like this is a derby now. It's taken on that kind of quality. The way we lost at St. James's Park obviously was very painful and controversial. They inflicted a wound against us 2 seasons ago. We got them back last season away. This season away, obviously, we know how that went. So now they come to the Emirates. And I think we got a little lucky in a way with this being an 8 p.m. kickoff, because I think the atmosphere is going to be absolutely rocking. It gives us just that little bit more time to get rested and prepared from the midweek exertions. Maybe we get a player back. I mean, we have heard nothing on Jesus, nothing on Zinchenko, nothing on Partey. We know they were close. Vieira was on the bench for this game, so to the extent that you think Vieira is a savior for Arsenal, your mileage may vary, but he should be available. Newcastle, it's interesting. They had been going through a very, very bad moment. They've sort of righted the ship, I guess, in that they've won 2 and drawn 2 of their last 4 Premier League fixtures. Now, having said that, they beat Villa away. So that's something, although Emery is Emerying. Then they drew at home to Luton. They won away at Forest, and they drew at home to Bournemouth. And in those games, they conceded 1-4, 2, and 2. And the thing with Newcastle that is really striking when you look at them from a data standpoint this season is the way they have cratered defensively. I don't even have to give you the advanced metrics. They've conceded, 41 goals, right? Which puts them bottom half for goals conceded. That's actually overperforming their expected goals, which is 44. Their expected goals against puts them 17th. Now, let's be clear. 7 of those all happened against Liverpool. If you recall that absolute demolition. But despite it being a demolition, Liverpool could have lost that game. So it's just a reminder to stuff your advanced metrics sometimes, because it's about putting it in the back of the net. And I think coming off of the 5-0, 6-0, I think 7-0, 8-0. I think we can pound this Newcastle team, but we've just taken a dent to our confidence, and I wonder how that impacts us going into this. So, Clive, my expectation is that it might be the same team again if no one is fit, and that's going to be 3 games in a week, right? It's going to be the first time we've had that cadence in a while. We went from January, where we basically didn't play, to now being more in the rhythm that top-level teams get into. Let's start there. If no one's back, let's just say for a minute no one's back.
Yep.
Do you think he'd change it? Or do you think we'll see the same 11 and just run it back?
Yeah, the one move to add a bit of poise is Jorginho. That's the only move I'd make, and I may be taken out for Trossard. But Elliot, I'm quite comfortable with whatever team selected because we can make changes when we have people available. I think it's important that we get our approach right, and if we don't get our approach right, then the players look bad. Right, this reminds me of Chelsea. We can't play this that we did last night. We can't do that again. But Newcastle were the other team, weren't they? They were the first team that we spoke about ball in playtime about. Remember? They were the first ones.
Oh, they're going to follow the Porto game plan. They're going to see that and say, let's do that again. I don't think Premier League referees are going to give them as much.
But it's on our minds, isn't it? It's on our minds. In the deepest parts of our minds, it's there that Newcastle may do that. But that's when we can control our environment a bit better. So Newcastle's forward, even though they were getting beaten, they were starting to turn around. I think they bring out their best performances against us. For some reason, we've managed to rile them, or they rile us, and so I'm not expecting it to be easy. But I do think we really need it. We really do need this one, and I think we can just settle down then. And if we get that, we can settle down. This is the week. There's always going to be a pressured week. We can settle down and then prepare for the next phase of games, which are more comfortable, hopefully, with more players available. That's the key. That is, I'm repeating myself, but it is the key to any sustained performance levels being high, is making sure that we can rotate appropriately. And at this moment in time, it feels like we're back to the old Zach Swanson Arsenal. Do you know what I mean? Now it's James Sweet. And so
don't forget Heaven.
Yeah, and that's just and he's not a bad player, by the way. But it's just where we are. It's a sign, isn't it? Young players for the experience to fill the bench because we have injuries and we need them back.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's a surprise that even with injuries, we came back from Dubai looking as sharp as we did because we play a very intense game. Right, we press a lot. We're one of the pressingest teams in the league, and there was a spring back in the step of these players, and I think we were able to execute physically at a very high level. Now the fatigue creeps back in, and you see a Bukayo Saka whose legs looked a little heavy against Porto, and you just wonder if the lack of options becomes an issue for the way we want to play. You know,
I do think. Just going back to Porto a little bit earlier, I think what surprised me was in the interviews that I saw from Rice and Arteta, for example, how they come to terms with it really quickly.
Yeah,
I thought they really come to terms with it, and they almost gave me comfort, to see them, because I thought they know what's wrong. Don't get dramatic. They know what's wrong here. When we lost to West Ham, I sort of got home. I was devastated, and I looked at Scott's data, and I thought, that gives me comfort that we're doing the right thing. Don't lose your marbles. And Arteta and Rice and the interviews that I saw from the players, I thought, nah, man, this is not going to last. They're not prepared to throw away the positivity. So don't lose your mind. Don't lose your mind over this. Even though,
leave that to me.
Yeah. By the way, listener, Elliot just worry through the games. Every single non-pass, we have to discuss it. So yeah, it's a challenge for me, a personal challenge.
Why didn't he play that?
So that's the cross I have to bear. But there you go. But yeah, we have to just stay with this group. But learn this one, man. Learn this one. But let's see how quickly they move on. Let's see how quickly.
We need some players back. It's ultimately it seems obvious, but with the kinds of things we want to win, you can't have Kivior start every single game. You can't have Leo Trossard at 9 every single game. They're good players, and they're players that can contribute to our season, but you need Zinchenko, and you need Jesus, and you need Tomiyasu, and you need Thomas Partey, and these are players you need, and that's without even saying what if we lost another one, right?
Yeah.
So we are at the absolute limit of what we can be without and still look like Arsenal, and really we need to be adding things back in. We'll be there Saturday night. I think it'll be rocking. I think it'll be a good atmosphere. I remember we were all sort of complaining that when we go to Newcastle, it always feels like, it's a night game. It's under the lights at St. James's Park, right? What was it, 2 seasons ago when they really put the dagger in for our top 4 hopes? I want to say that was a night game. I know we had the night game at Spurs right before that. Well, they're coming to ours for a game under the lights at the Emirates. And I think it will be very hostile atmosphere. And I'm really excited to see how the team bounces back. It is the case that I think there's how good we hope we are, and then there's how good we actually are. And this season, I think it was starting to transition from hope we are to really just being that good. And since Dubai, we've been playing like a team that knows it's one of the best in the world. This is a setback. And I think you are measured not by what you're doing when everything's going well, but what you do when you take a punch in the mouth, right? When you get set back. Yeah. And so I think the nice thing about this game is, frankly, sure, would it be nice to have Luton at home as our next fixture? That'd be nice. But I actually think it's better to have Newcastle at home because I think defensively they're weak. I think they're beatable. It's going to be under the lights. It's going to be a big occasion. And I think winning this game can actually give us something back that beating a Luton at 3 p.m. on a Saturday at home can't. I think if we can win this game, it can erase a little bit of the psychic damage done by the Porto game and get us back in a good position for that tie. Because
good point.
If I were the players, honestly, I'd want to play Porto again tomorrow. I'd have that in my mind already. But having a big game at the weekend, I think helps keep us focused. It really makes sure that they don't step out on the pitch on Saturday thinking about Galeno's goal. They step out on the pitch thinking about beating Newcastle, and that's a little bit of a gift. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Saturday night the nation will be watching. There's no other games going on at the same time, and so we will be literally under the lights. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think it's time for us to show. But like I say, I'm not worried. But I'm hopeful that we're going to get the result. I think it's really important. Really important.
Much as I feel the depression lifting off of me from last night, the skies are clearing here in Porto a bit, and maybe a sort of symbolic reminder to us all to let last night go, to try to put it into context. Because I think right after the game, I had a little bit of anger. I was like, we're too good to play that way. We're too good to lose that game. But it can happen in football, and what matters is the response. So Mikel's biggest challenge now, I think, will be turn the attention of the players to the response and not to the recrimination and the regret, and to lift them for that. So I think, I think in terms of the timing and the opponent, maybe we've been given a little bit of a gift there. We'll see what happens. I think Newcastle, without quite a few players, some players not in particularly good form. Kieran Trippier, who is so important for them, but defensively has been a liability, will be one I think we'll be targeting, of course. So I think there's something there for us. We'll see. We'll do some stuff pregame on that over the next couple of days. We'll have some stuff for you on Patreon tomorrow and over the weekend. Then I'll have the travel journal out, video journal, if you want to see that, get a bit of a flavor for the trip and the away day for Europe. But yeah, look, as a final reminder, the football is the thing. That's the main thing. Without it, none of this happens. But when you get the chance to come out and see people, I live very, very far away from the Arsenal, and I connect with so many people in a digital space that I love and care about. But when you do get to give hugs and toast and sing the songs and be shoulder to shoulder, that's a really special thing, and one that I feel very privileged and grateful to have the opportunity to do it with you, Clive, and to do it with so many really great people out here in Porto, and to try to make sure that you make one of those trips, if you can make it, wherever it is, to the Emirates or wherever, and not let the football ruin it completely. Because it was, there were people out drinking late into the night with smiles on after the game, and it's nice to be able to do that, even if the football didn't make us feel that way,
Yep, it was. Met some really good people yesterday, and to reconnect with them is really, really good, and it just reminds me, don't take all this for granted. We all support a really, really special club, and a lot of the people that are around us, that are connected to us and to each other, are they're like-minded people, right? And so we're very, very fortunate. We're fortunate to have this platform and to be able to discuss, and people want to listen, and I want to thank people for doing so.
Yeah, well said. All right, I think that's enough. It is definitely a case of the combination of the late night and the jet lag getting to my brain a bit. So we'll knock it on the head and get some more stuff out to you in the next few days. So big weekend ahead. Clive's on Twitter, ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith, Black Man Ink Gunner. If you don't mind leaving us a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to, that turns out that's important for other people to help find the show, which would be brilliant. So we love you. And for goodness sake, we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Newcastle 0.